Welcome to the Cotton Club Radio. I'm your host, Cotton Club. Today's conversation, family, I'm going to call this A Tether is what a tether does. You heard what I said, family. A tether is what a tether does. Family, I have to do this because there seems to be a misconception out on these streets about what a tether is and how a tether operates. Living in New York City, I've lived around tethers my entire life, but I didn't have a name for it. Many of us didn't have a name for these people. They had names for us, but we didn't have a name for them. You understand? A tether, I just want to go through a quick definition because a lot of people act like they don't know what a tether is. And it's interesting because most of the people who act like they don't know what a tether is are people who are tethers. But let's just get to the point. So a tether is an individual who, for his own individual gain, undermines the Black American community. It could be in various different forms. It can be like many of us who are used to certain tethers where their parents, they're raised by tethers. Their parents tell them disparaging things about Black American people. Don't hang out with those Black Americans. You know, those Black Americans are dirty. Those Black Americans are welfare babies. Those Black Americans are dangerous, gangsters, thugs, etc. We all know what they call us, right? When many foreigners come here and talk about Black Americans. These are mostly tethers who do that, right? Where they tell their children disparaging things about Black American. That's a form of a tether. A person who for no good reason other than disliking Black Americans and being xenophobic, they just disparage Black American people. That's a tether to me. And then you have tethers who get into political office, who work and undermine in the political apparatus, in the political space. Either they're getting on reparations panels and voting against non-lineage reparations. They're voting for race-based reparations, which we know is illegal. You can't get reparations on no race-based nothing. It has to be lineage-based. But you'll have many people from foreign backgrounds. They'll get into these reparations panels and they'll purposely vote for race-based reparations, knowing that that's going to get shut down. That's a tether to me. Another form of a tether, which is an individual who actively undermines Black American people. It can be by getting online, saying disparaging things about FBAs and etc. So we know what a tether is. But I think people lose sight of the real reality of what a tether does. Because a tether is not a person who comes from a Caribbean background, just coming from a Caribbean background or coming from a African background or whatever background. That's not a tether, family. A tether is a person who actively does shit. They actively do things to undermine Black American people. So when I say a tether is what a tether does, you have to be doing something. You can't just you're not just looking at you and say, hey, there goes the tether. No, you got to actually be doing something that really personifies you being a tether. You understand, family? Because at the end of the day, most people who actively do disparaging things against Black American people, I'm going to keep it funky with you, they are tethers. Family, this goes into the conversation about a tether that I saw online. There was a dude, don't know where he was, from the Caribbean islands. And I don't know why it's always got to be some Caribbean island person. Shout out to the Caribbean islands, man. But y'all got to check y'all people. This is the problem. There's a lot of foreigners coming from the Caribbean islands who are not checking Caribbean island people when they're out of line. And this is the reason why many of them are getting called tethers. You understand? Because if you're from the Caribbean islands and people are saying disparaging things that are about Black American people and you know it's not true, you're supposed to get on top of that person. You're supposed to check that person. And there's been a lot of people coming from the Caribbean islands who are unchecked and they're getting online and saying disparaging things against Black Americans, and Black Americans are eviscerating them online for saying disparaging things. And then everybody's crying foul. Oh, these Black Americans, they're attacking everybody. No, we're not. Right? We're just putting tethers in a tether place because many of you won't do it. But anyways, there was a tether who came online, family. And he was from one of these Caribbean islands, and he said something real interesting, something that I felt was necessary, something that I felt I had to come and speak on, family. He tried to make a false equivalence on the Great Migration, right? When many Black folks, including my grandmother, who's from Biloxi, Mississippi, she moved from Biloxi, Mississippi to New York in 1957, right? This tether came online, family. Don't know from what Caribbean island he was from, but he was definitely Caribbean. And he began to draw out a false comparison on how he said that fleeing was a good thing. Many of you probably seen the video. He tried to implement that fleeing your country, or fleeing just in general, was a good thing. And he made a false comparison. He said Black American freedmen, FBAs, fled the South to the North. So he said that that's equivalent to immigrants fleeing their country and coming to America. Yeah, that's what he said, family. I don't know why this tether decided to make this false comparison, but Cotton Club Radio, I got to speak on it, family. I got to correct this notion because it's weird and it's strange, man. And I've been hearing this lately, how a lot of tethers, are trying to compare the Great Migration, where Black folk from the South, many of whom families resided in the South. It was just some Black people. It wasn't everybody. But believe it or not, 90% of Black folks, FBAs, are still in the South. This idea that Black folks just left the South, to the northern cities and nobody else was left there, that's a misnomer. And this is the problem that a lot of tethers have. They don't know nothing about Black American history. They're reading the exterior, but they don't know the interior. They don't have family members who actually left the South. They haven't spoke to their grannies. They haven't spoke to their aunties and uncles who grew up in the South and moved to the northern cities and when they were about, 8, 9, 10 years old. So we have firsthand conversations about our family members coming from the South into the cities. But for some strange reason, the tether is infatuated with lying. And that's another attribute, family, that we have to watch out for a lot of these tethers. Because it's almost synonymous with a tether. They just can't stop making shit up. They can't just stop lying, family. And I find that very weird. When it's very easy to tell the truth, you don't have to lie. Share the space, family. Y'all share the space if you can. You dig? But it seems like in efforts to disparage the Black American foundational Black American community, tethers just say anything. They just make up shit on the spot. And this seems to be something that's very synonymous with a tether. So this individual said Black Americans fled the South to the northern cities and refused to build the South. And they came to the northern cities because they fled. They fled the South. And it's called the Great Migration. Family, let's talk about it. Let's talk about that. So you have Black Americans moving. Okay, we can change the word fled. That's an inaccurate term. All right. You had Black Americans moving willfully in the country that they built from one state to another. This is what really happened, family. This is, when tethers try to explain it because they don't have firsthand account, they just reading from a book or they're just trying to lie. They'll try to emphasize fleeing because many of them feel guilty that they fled their countries. So they try to create this false equivalency. So Black Americans from around 1908 into about 1950, into the 1950s, Black Americans, many of whom were looking for job opportunities, many of whom were trying to get into show business. New York was, the cities. Many of the cities had factories, and they were offering union jobs, etc. Black Americans wanted to expand their dollars and expand their horizon. So many moved to the northern cities, many of whom were moving to Harlem, many of whom were moving to Chicago and Detroit, getting into show business, many of whom were musicians, etc. They were expanding their dollars in a country that their ancestors built. Moving is not fleeing. Relocating in your country where the culture is still the same, the language is still the same, your identity is still intact, you're not assimilating into a different language and a different customs, thoughts, and practices. You're just moving from one state to another. Family, that is not on any level comparable to a foreigner moving from one country where the language is different, the culture is different, the customs, the thoughts, the practices are completely different. While one has to move from one country to another to assimilate into a total different culture and adapt into a total different understanding of reality. So when this tether tried to bring up the false equivalence, family, stick with me, about Black Americans in the Great Migration to tethers moving from one country to another, and calling that fleeing and saying fleeing is good. This is what the tether said. He said fleeing was good. Black Americans fled the South, and immigrants from all over the abroad are fleeing their islands and coming over here. Family, this is absurd, but this is common with the tether. And this is the reason why I call this commentary a tether is what a tether does, because that shit right there, bringing up that false equivalency, that's some tether shit. That's kind of what they do. They bring up false equivalencies. They make up stuff on the spot. They just lie like a rug. I don't understand, family, how if you look online, there are so many people from various different islands, from Africa, the islands, etc. Caribbean people, people who are non-FBA, getting online and just making stuff up. Let me just introduce a lot of people to Black American culture. Black American people, we don't just like lying. Like lying is looked upon in our community as something that's ill, that is a product of bad habit, a product of bad behavior. And people who lie, that's frowned upon. When you're little, I remember years ago, when I was a kid, and my pops, he ain't like liars. My pops was a real religious man, and he used to talk to me and my brothers in metaphors. And in one metaphor he used with us, because when kids, lying is really a child thing. Children lie. They called it, in psychology they call it deductive reasoning. When you just evade the truth, you make up shit on the spot. That's an attribute that kids do, right? Grown people ain't supposed to be lying all the time. That's that's bad. That's a bad habit, in a bad sense of character and morale. But anyway, when we were little, me and my brothers, we would get caught in fibs here and there. And my pops would talk to us in metaphors. He would say, "Oh, what a web we weave when we practice to deceive." He would say little things to let me know, cut the bullshit. All right, we not doing that. You're gonna tell me the truth, and we gonna deal with the truth. He would say, "Oh, what a web we weave when we practice to deceive." He would say little things. He would say, if me and my brother got caught in a fib, he would say, "Don't shovel me no shit, because I ain't got my boots on." You understand? In other words, saying, man, cut the bull. Don't lie to me. Tell the truth. You understand? These were little things that he would do to let me and my brothers know that lying in this house was unacceptable. We don't do that. You are to tell the truth. You understand? And my brothers and I, many of time, had to learn the hard way. If we would get caught in a fib, we would get punishment. We'd have to go out into the backyard, and my pops would work us, and we couldn't do nothing until he was ready to move on with it. So I say to you tethers out there, in the Black American community, we view lying as one of the dirtiest things that a person could do. So tell me why, family, why are all these people, these tethers online, and all they do is lie, man? It's really, really insidious. I don't understand why the truth is so far from people's mouths, man. I want to talk about this Tasha K character. Now, I didn't know much about this female, to be honest with you, but she fits the description of a lying, deceiving, deceptive tether. Now, I don't know this lady's background, but it's almost like at this point in my life, man, I got tether radar. If and it's almost, with tethers, they just lying all the time. So if you come off to be a liar, I'm automatically going to assume you a tether. I don't know, family. Many of you probably are catching on to this shit too, with the tethers and lying. You motherfuckers just be making up stuff, So this lady, Tasha K, don't know much about her, but I saw a video that I felt like she was being very disparaging on foundational Black American people, and she was just making up lies on the spot, and it caught my eye. And not knowing anything about her, because I don't follow gossip and I don't follow tethers, but I don't know, man, something about her came off kind of tetherish, family. My tether radars went up, because she started comparing Black Americans in this delineation movement in FBA to the KKK, family. That's what she did. Now, who in the damn world would make that kind of peep this, family? Always watch. One of the biggest indicators to spot a tether is the false equivalence. They always seem to bear the false equivalence. That seems to be something that they're doing. You can spot a tether from a mile away, because they normally take something that you and I, as Black Americans, understand, and that is very simple, and they flip and twist it and try to draw out some kind of false equivalence with it. So she compared, family, the Black American, foundational Black American, yes, in our delineation movement, to the KKK. Wow. Let's talk about it, family. First of all, many people don't know that the KKK was actually started in the Christian church. Okay? They originally started in the Christian church, the YT Christian church. And they were a subset of poor YT peasants. Many of them were Irish. Many of them were other YT peasants. And because many of these people were living in proximity to Black folk, who many of them were flourishing, many of them were getting into political office, many of them were, many Black men were beginning to vote. Many Black families were building Black wealth, etc. You had a lot of peasant YT people who were getting jealous, family. This is how the KKK started. Cotton Club Radio is about to drop it on y'all. And they started they're having church meetings, family, these YT peasant people in the South. And they started to conjure up reasons as to why Black people were toxic and Black people were dangerous. And one of their talking points was the Black male was primal and couldn't and had to be tamed. You understand what I'm saying, family? So they started conjuring up little twisted stories and twisted ideas that Black men wanted YT women. So they see, understand that in order for the KKK to evolve, they had to create a false premise. They had to create a false victim, and they chose the YT woman, family. And they created this narrative that these untamed, dangerous Negroes were out there lurking in the bush to get YT women. And this is something that they were spewing in their churches. Ain't that interesting? So they started spewing that that the black man was dangerous and needed to be tamed in their churches. And that's where the foundation of the KKK began. So they started to enact little organizations and chapters, and they started going out there and trying to police black people. If they saw some black folk, they question them. Hey, where you going, Negro? And what are you doing? And what you got? And yeah, come here. And, kind of some of the stuff they still do to this day. If you get caught walking in certain towns, you got average citizens, YT people feeling like they could police your body, police where you are and what you're doing. They started doing that back then in the 18th century. So this is the origins of the KKK. And they started to evolve from that of a little small church congregation and little church meeting group to an organization and a terrorist group family. Now, this Tasha K character, this lying, scandalous Tether family, said that the foundational Black American is like the KKK, this false comparison. See, the foundational Black American is a individual who has lineage to the foundation of this American country. It doesn't matter if you have indigenous roots. It doesn't matter if you have ties to lineage to someone who was enslaved. As long as your family comes from the foundation of this country, you are a foundational Black American. This includes American Indians. This includes freedmen. This includes people who have mixed origin. If you have ancestry and lineage to people who built this country, you are a foundational Black American. And the Delineation movement is a movement that was inspired to solidify, to protect the lineage of these very people. Because just about 6 or 7 years ago, not even that long ago, maybe about 3 or 4 years ago, the Democrats were responsible for flooding our country with a boatload, what they said, over 20 million migrants into the country, many of whom were from Africa, many of whom were from Caribbean islands, etc. Many of these people were coming here, and immediately on documentation, they were classifying as Black American and African American. And this set off the Delineation movement, family, because Black Americans started saying, hold on, wait a minute. You Negroes are not of the same lineage as us. So no, you're not an African American. No, you're not a Black American. You're an African and you're a Caribbean person. You don't share the same lineages of me. We're not doing the all Black thing. Flat blackness needs to go. And this is what inspired the Delineation movement, family. Black Americans having to stop and press pause on all the immigration with folks trying to come here and assume our lineage and come here and try to identity swap us. Many of the Africans were coming here and saying, well, yeah, you're an African American and I'm an African. We the same thing. We said, no, hell, no, we not. We're not the same thing. What are you talking about? Many of you are tethers. Y'all don't even like Black American people. We not the same. And then you had many Caribbean people who started coming up with this twisted concept that, their islands are in the Americas, they're melanated, so they're Black. So they started calling themselves Black Americans. And we started saying, hold on, you can't be a Black American because you're Haitian. You can't be a Black American because you're Jamaican. When did this shit start? When did y'all become Black American? And then you had many Haitians started saying, well, Haiti is in the Americas, isn't it? So I'm American. And I'm Black, so I'm Black American. This is what sparked off the Delineation movement. So when people start acting like Black Americans are tripping and we just going crazy, when we start saying, hey, you island Negroes are from the islands and us freedmen Negroes are from the mainlands. We just adapt different and we just socialize different. Many of you are xenophobic. Many of us are embracing. We're told we come from two different cultures, two different perspectives. You come over here, you separate yourself. You come over here, we embrace you. We are not the same. We don't go to your countries and separate ourselves. We go to your countries and ingratiate ourselves in the culture, not confusing ourselves with you. We know that we're Black American. We don't go to Africa claiming to be Africans, and those who do are delusional. We don't deal with them. We call them out. We tell them that they're delusional. For the Pan-Africans who go to Africa and talking about, oh, we African. And we say, well, you can stay your butt in Africa. And they say, no, we coming on home. All right, well, cut the bullshit. All right. Because if you're African, you can go to Africa, you can stay there, but you don't want to do that, do you? No, you don't. So cut it out. So we Black Americans have a history of calling out people who are delusional, or calling people out who are turncoats to the Black American community. And this is the issue with the term tether and why it had to be created. Because for a long time, there was no name for people who were coming from the islands or coming from Africa who were coming over here and immediately undermining Black American people. We didn't have a name for these people. I'll give you an example. I'm going to tell you a personal story, family, of an encounter with some tethers, but I didn't have the name to call them a tether, but I knew that these people were off code, and I knew that these people were disrespectful, and I knew that they were foreign. But I didn't have the name tether to really identify these people. Years ago, I was dating a Caribbean girl. She wasn't a tether. She was cool. I ain't going to do her like that. She was cool. And she invited me over for dinner, family. Yeah, she invited Cotton Club over for dinner. And I went over. You know, she was Jamaican. And I went over to her crib, family. It was her stepmother, her father, and her sister. They invited Cotton Club over for dinner, right? And almost immediately, I was sitting at the table, and everything was weird because the parents weren't really talking, and they were just looking at me all weird and shit like that. I found that to be very strange. Normally, if your daughter's boyfriend comes over, you might want to get to know the guy. You know what I'm saying? Talk to him or whatever. But they weren't talking. Her parents. They were just looking at me. And then out of nowhere, they started talking, saying disparaging things about Black American people, family. Right with Cotton Club at the table, family. They didn't even wait for me to leave. They started talking like weird things. They started mentioning welfare. Yeah, I'm going to expose these people. Family, for the tethers that they are. And it blew my mind. They started talking about Black Americans being on welfare and Black American not having no fathers in the home. All of the stereotypes that you can imagine, family. I was sitting at this table with my girlfriend's parents, and they were spewing stereotypes that you and me know, family. They were spewing those same stereotypes right at the damn table with me sitting right across from me. And at this time, family, I didn't listen. I consider myself an upstanding individual. I consider myself a catch. I am not a lowlife, a loser, none of that. I am college educated. I am successful. I am an artist. I am an entrepreneur. I'm an author. I have a lot of layers to me. Many of you don't know. I don't just get up here talking shit. All right. I am quite accomplished. All right. But even then, as a young Cotton Club, I was still quality. I wasn't some loser. So when I went over to my at the time, my girlfriend's house, and she invited me over for dinner to meet her family. And they began to say all kind of stereotypes about Black American people right there at the table. Oh, I remember her stepmother was like, what do you think about welfare and so many Black Americans being on welfare? I looked at her like, what? I looked at my ex, I looked at her, and she looked at me like, holy shit. She couldn't believe her stepmother said that. And she began to say, I don't think that's appropriate. But then the father stepped in and he started talking to me and he started asking me questions. So what do you think about the single parent household and a lot of black Americans not having daddies in their home and shit like that? And I just looked at him and I'm like, this, what is this? Some kind of ambush, family? These people were tethers. This is what we mean for the Caribbean family, for the African family out there. When we say tether, this is what we're talking about. This is a action word, family. This isn't we're not just saying anything disparaging. We are identifying people who have the hate and disdain for black American people, and they show it in many, many different ways. And here I was thinking that I was in a safe space and I was in a safe zone. You understand what I'm saying? With my girlfriend at the time and her family, she was Jamaican. Her family was Jamaican. I thought I was in a safe space. She invited me over for dinner, and here I am in front of her parents, and they're saying disparaging things about black American people. I was ambushed. This is what a tether is. This is what a tether does for people who act stupid and act confused. They can't even hold their hate and disdain for black American people. Her parents were tethers. I didn't have a name for it. I didn't understand what they were. I knew that they were weird. I knew that they were acting strange. I knew that they had open hostility toward me. Couldn't understand why. Now I do. Now I understand why. Years later, her and I broke up and moved on with our lives. I wish her well. But I know now that those people who ambushed me at that dinner table, they were tethers. They were Caribbean immigrants who had an issue, who had problems with foundational black American people. And they couldn't even wait for Cotton Club Radio to leave the house and get home before they begin to enact their island mentality, their xenophobia, and their stereotypes against a black American young man at that time. And this is what we mean when we say that a tether is an action word. You have to be active in your participation in denigrating black American people. You have to be active. And a lot of these foreigners are very active in denigrating black American people. You understand? And I'm going to keep it 125% funky with you, family. I believe in my heart of hearts that the reason why me and Shorty did not work is because her parents basically stepped in and said, no black Americans. Nope. Don't bring another black American home. And because many of these first gen, second gen immigrants, many of their parents are tethers. Many of them adapt tether ways. And it goes right down the pipe. It goes right down the line. Many of them, they start off being rebellious to their parents, but many of them become their parents in the latter of their lives. So no, black Americans ain't tripping when we say a tether is what a tether does. It's a action word. It means that you're doing something. And many of you you try to play the game like you don't know what you're doing. Like old boy who drew out the false comparison that black Americans moving from the South were fleeing, comparing that to immigrants fleeing their countries. There's no comparison. Old boy was trying to play dumb. You can't compare people moving from one state to another, to people moving from one country to another where the country is failing and in turmoil and in abject poverty, right? Where black people in the South had already built up the South. Many of them own homes. Many of them own land. You understand? They were expanding their dollars in a country that they were paying taxes. You can't compare that to no foreigner who's dropped everything they had and came to a foreign country where they had to learn a new language, new customs and cultures, etc. That ain't the same. You understand? But it's very common. It's very common for tethers to lie. So we have to be very, 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 very understanding that we are living in a time, family, to the FBA family. Let me talk to you, because they're trying to formulate, they're sending their COINTELPRO tactics toward us, these COINTELPRO social media tactics, and trying to sully the delineation movement by calling us xenophobic and calling us divisive, and etc. But family, I am telling you to stand your ground. Don't let these people make it seem like we're the ones who are being open and xenophobic and aggressive toward these people. We are defending ourselves from years and years and years of open aggression from people who we did not know and people we did not do anything to. But they were open. They were being openly xenophobic toward us. They would be openly, we would be openly subjected to many of their biases and island mentalities. You understand? And we did not deserve it. And many of us at the time were very, very mature about it. We didn't dislike these people. We didn't treat these people with the same animus that they were treating us. But now we're coming full circle and we're saying, you know what? All of that shit you've been doing all these years, being disrespectful toward us, calling us Yankees, calling us Akatas, saying little disparaging things. You know what? We can just ice this shit down the middle. We ain't really got to be dealing with y'all like that, because to be honest with you, there's no real benefit in dealing with you people. You benefit more dealing with us than we benefit dealing with you. And that's the reality. That's what it's come down to. There's no hate. There's no dislike. I still like a lot of Caribbean people. I don't have a problem with them. But when it comes to this delineation, it has to be respected, because there are boundaries in everybody's culture. I don't go to Caribbean people's events being xenophobic. I don't go to Caribbean people events trying to take the shit over. You understand? I just don't do that. Black American people don't do that. If we go to a Caribbean event, we go as guests and we show love and pay homage. And that's just who we are. We want the same damn respect. That's all we saying. Don't come to our events trying to take the shit over. That has to stop. All right? Because if you do, we're going to call your ass out. We're going to call you tethers, because that's what tethers do. It's an action word. A tether is what a tether does. And if you're doing some tether shit, you're a tether. And don't try to go up and don't try to be mixing up people's words and all of that. You understand? Every time trying to draw out false equivalent, like I told you before, one of the biggest signs of a tether is the false equivalence. So you got to look out for the false equivalence with the tether. Now they're trying to make the term tether equivalent to when they were calling us Yankees and calling us Akatas and Jareers and Abids. Now they're saying, well, the term tether is a derogatory term. Let's break that down. Well, when people were calling us Yankees, what was that really about? They weren't saying you, American Negro, is a Yankee. They were saying them, all of these American Negroes are Yankees. And the Africans were calling us Akatas. They weren't saying you, American Negro freedman, is a Akata. They were saying all of these Negroes are Akatas. These are derogatory terms. A Yankee, from a Caribbean perspective, is an American-born black person, an American freedman Negro. And all of us were considered Yankees by the description of many of the Caribbeans. Akadas, Jareer, and Abid are all derogatory terms for black American people, black American freedmen. They were terms used to put all American freedmen Negroes in a box so the African could describe us. The term tether is not a designation for all Caribbean people, and it's not a designation for all African people. A tether is a person who is trying to undermine the Black American, foundational Black American people, either politically, socially, or economically. If you are a person from a foreign background and you are trying to sabotage Black Americans politically by saying things like, I ain't gonna do nothing only for Black people, do we need to say names, or do many of you know who I'm talking about? That's a tether. Or by saying we need to get rid of Black History Month, that's a tether. Or saying Black Americans don't deserve reparations, that's a tether. Or by saying the leading cause to Black American issues is no daddies in the household, that's a tether. Okay? You know who you are. If you are trying to sabotage Black American people economically, if you are a person of a foreign background and you're in a job in a Black American fills out an application, and you take that application and throw that shit to the bottom of the rack, you're a tether. If you are working at your job and a person from a foreign background is trying to get you fired so they can bring in more of their people, that's a tether. If you're working at your job and a person from a foreign background is trying to over police you and tell on you when you're coming in late, or what, just doing little slick shit to undermine you so you can lose your job, that's a tether. If you are a foreign person who uses any of the talking points that YTs use, even trying to call Black American people xenophobic, trying to call the Delineation movement, the KKK, and all of that bullshit, if you are doing any of that, you are a tether. Okay? It is okay. You can sit down, you can calm down, and you can drink your tether lemonade. Because just because we can spot you now and you can't hide among us, you are upset. Back when Negroes were pushing that flat black shit, you could hide amongst us. And you can do all of these things I mentioned secretly. But now our eyes is on you, and when you move, we move with you. And where you go, we watching where you going. And when you go to the manager's office and go tell on us to try to get us fired, we saw you do that. And now we know what you about. So you can't hide no more. You can't just change your accent no more. You can't say we all the same no more. You are exposed and you don't like it. You're upset about that. You don't know what to do. You wish, you cry, and you fuss that Black Americans go back to Pan-Africanism so your ass can hide amongst us again. So we can't see you when you go to our reparation panels and try to sabotage us by trying to push flat blackness and saying, well, yeah, those American Negroes don't necessarily, they're not the only ones who's owed reparations. The whole diaspora is owed reparations. But you had an American Freedmen reparations panel trying to say that Black people need reparations, knowing that shit is illegal. You are a tether. You understand? So I hope that this conversation was constructive. And I hope that we understand now that a tether is what a tether does.
King. Look. Let your angel sing. I ain't twisted, this ain't the Henny talking for me. This is literally Malcolm Little talking through me. I ain't possessed, this is just when spirit meets the flesh. And a revolutionary is born, nothing less. It's hard for me to cope with stress, especially when I see the world much different from the rest. I can't sleep, nightmares, waking up, cold sweat, wondering if I ever made it, will they do me like the rest? It's for my black souls who really too upset to rest, so they wander through my dreams. Please tell me what this means.